everyone, this is Neeti and you are at Odd Stories YouTube channel. For all those people who are joining for the first time, this is Neeti. I'm a podcast producer for my brand called Odd Story. Here we produce podcasts for all the brands out there so that they can bring out their long form content and try and build a special niche audience for their brand. That's the whole idea about podcasting. Well, if we talk about today's episode, today we'll be talking about show notes, which is a very important aspect of a podcast. I know you guys prefer creating audio content and writing. Well, that's not your cup of tea. It is not for me as well, trust me, but show notes are very, very important. And that's why we will be discussing about 3 different things you need to keep in mind while writing show notes. Well, before we move forward with our show notes journey, please do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you love podcasts, listening to them, and also if you would like to create your own podcast, then this is the channel for you for all kind of information related to podcasting. And also please press the bell icon because that will always inform you whenever I'm there on my channel talking about podcasts. Now, let's not waste any more time and talk about show notes. For all those people who are new to podcasting, show notes are a few words. It's basically a description of the podcast overall. And also you write show notes for every episode. That is, you tell what is there in the episode in that particular description. If you go to Apple Podcasts, you can always check out the description of a particular podcast and also all its episode. Obviously, if the podcaster has written that description. And also, it is there on Spotify. And even if you're launching your podcast on your website, then this definitely plays a very important role. If you're wondering how, well, let me tell you, think like show notes are just like blogs. So what do you do for your blogs? You make sure that your blogs are ranking on Google. That is, they're 100% search engine optimized. You use keywords which actually work for your brand. That's exactly what you're going to do for your show notes. Whenever you write show notes, always try and make sure that your show notes are searchable. So number 1, your show notes need to be searchable because they're just like blogs. If you put them on the website, you should use the keywords which are very important for your brand so that whenever people try and search something related to your brand or your product line, those keywords should be there in your show notes. Obviously, your show notes will be slightly different because they'll be episode based, but you can always find a common thread, right? That's what you need to do for your show notes. For example, if your podcast is related to digital marketing because you are a digital marketer or you have a digital marketing agency, then as your podcast is also related to similar things and you give tips and tricks about digital marketing, Facebook ads, Google ads, then obviously your show notes will have those important keywords that help you rank on Google. Also, it's an additional form of information related to your brand. That is how you will treat your show notes. Number 2, your show notes need to be descriptive, informative, yet crisp. Crisp is my favorite word when it comes to content creation. Everything needs to be crisp, it should be sharp, and it should be just to the point. That is what is there for your show notes also. So obviously your show notes should have description about the episode and what all you're talking in the episode, but you should write it in a very crisp manner. It should attract attention of the people. Whenever they read your show notes, they should immediately feel like, oh, they need to listen to this episode because it is having something very important. So your show note should also have, clickbait is a very negative word, so let me use a better word. So your show notes should have a hook. If you're having an interesting conversation with your guest, keep a question there. Do you want to know this thing about the guest? Well, if you want to, then you listen to the podcast episode. So you should use your show notes as your hook as well. Again, if I repeat my second point, it should be informative, it should be descriptive, yet it should be crisp and should have the hook. Now, before we dive into point number 3, let me tell you, please be extra attentive here. I want to highlight this point. Of course, show notes need to be descriptive and they need to have information related to the episode, but you can actually use them for call to action. Yes, CTA. A lot of people don't do that, but you can do that because that will help you to grow your brand, build your community. Your show notes will have information about the episode, yes. But what exactly do you want people to do? If they listen to your episode and you want them to subscribe to your newsletter, or if you want them to listen to some other episode, or if you want them to go to your product link, you can always put that in your show notes. And obviously, you will be relating it with the information you're giving in the show notes. For example, you have a particular podcast where you interview, say, startup owners and some successful startup owners. So you invite them, you talk to them, and what you mention in the show notes is that if you want to know more about this particular person, if you want to understand his success case study, then please click to this particular link. And then you take people to your website where you ask people to probably share their email address or probably subscribe to your newsletter, and there you put a PDF out there which is the case study of the success story of that particular guest who was there on your show. So did you notice what all you did? Well, first your show notes had description, some interesting information about that particular startup owner whom you had invited. Then obviously there's some audio information, the interview, what people can listen to, and if they are interested and they want to know more, then they will click to the link which is again there in your show notes to get to know more about that particular person, to download his success case study, and in return they will be either subscribing to your newsletter or giving their email address to you. Well, is it making sense for you? What is happening is that you are building a community for yourself, and more people are connecting with you, not only for one form of content but for various forms of content. That's my magical tip for you guys. Always put CTA in your show notes. Well, with this, we come to the end of this particular episode. If you would like to know about my vaccination story, I still haven't got any slot. I still need to have my first jab. I'm trying my level best to get one single slot, but all in vain. That's the story for now. But for you guys, again, please stay home. Take very good care of yourself. I know working from home is difficult, but we all are trying, and always give priority to your mental health. That should be your topmost priority because work, relationship, and all other things can wait. If your mind is at the right place, you'll be able to work everything. And even for me, I'm also trying to take small little steps to make sure that my this thing is safe. With this, once again, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find this on Instagram and Facebook as well. Odd Story is our handle. Bye bye. Take care. See you next Wednesday.